Good morning, everyone. We are from Group 1. We are going to present about the organization of international business. First, my name is Putri Langit, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the introduction of this chapter. This chapter is concerned with identifying the organizational architecture that international businesses use to manage and direct their global operations. The core argument outlined in this chapter is that superior enterprise profitability requires three conditions to be fulfilled. First, the different elements of a firm's organizational architecture must be internally consistent. Second, the organizational architecture must match or fit the strategy of the firm must be consistent. The last one, the strategy and architecture of the firm must make sense given the competitive condition prevailing in the firm's market must be consistent. Next, I'm going to explain about organizational architecture. It refers to the totality of a firm's organization, including formal organizational structure, control systems and incentives, organizational culture, processes, and people. First, organizational structures means formal division, location of decision-making responsibilities, and integrating mechanisms. Next, control systems are metrics used to measure the performance of subunits and make judgments. Next, incentives. Incentives are devices used to reward appropriate managerial behavior. And processes are manner in which decisions are made and work is performed within the organization. Next, organizational culture is talking about norms and value systems that are shared among the employees of an organization. The last one, people. People is the strategy used to recruit, compensate, and retain employees. Now we are going to discuss about organizational structure. Organizational structure can be thought of in terms three dimensions. First, vertical differentiation, which refers to the location of decision-making responsibilities within a structure. Second, horizontal differentiation, which refers to the formal division of the organization into subunits. And the last one, integrating mechanisms, which are mechanisms for coordinating subunits. Now I'm going to explain about the vertical differentiation. There are two types of vertical differentiation, which are centralization and decentralization. And these are arguments for centralization. First, centralization can facilitate coordination and integration of operations. Second, centralization can help ensure the decisions are consistent with organizational objectives. Third, centralization can give top-level managers the means to bring about needed major organizational changes. The last one, centralization can avoid the duplication of activities that occurs when similar activities are carried. And these are arguments for decentralization. First, top management time to focus on critical issues by delegating more routine issues to lower level managers. And then second one is motivational research favors decentralizations. And then decentralizations permits greater flexibility. This means that decentralizations will bring a more rapid response to environmental changes. And then decisions are made closer to the spot. This means that decentralization will bring a better decision. And the last one is that decentralization used to establish relatively autonomous, self-contained subunits within an organization so that decentralization can increase control.
Arisma Putri, and now I want to talk about global strategy and centralization. So when the firm wants to pursue global standardization strategy, they should decide about how to disperse the various value creation activities around the global, so the firm can realize location and experience curve economies. It requires centralization on the decision making when we talk about how the firm should coordinate the dispersed value creation around the world. But when the firm wants to pursuing localization strategy, the firm should emphasize on local responsiveness that demand for decentralization. So for the firm pursuing international strategy, they will maintain centralization control for core competencies such as R&D and decentralization decision that related to operational activities. For the firm pursuing transnational strategy, the firms need to realize localization and experience curve economies, but at the same time they need high local responsiveness. So the firms will mix the centralization and decentralization in operating decisions. Next is we talk about horizontal differentiation. In horizontal differentiation, we will talk about how the firm decide to divide itself into the subunits. Normally, the structure of organizational will be divided based on function, type of business, or geographic area. In this horizontal differentiation, we will talk about five things, which are the structure of domestic firm, international division, worldwide area structure, worldwide product divisional structure, and global metric structure. We'll talk about the structure of domestic firms. Most of the small business will start organizational with no formal structure, whereas the business grow and also the demand for management is increased too. So the organization will split the structure into the functional structure, which it will reflecting the firm's value creation activities, which divided by production, marketing, R&D, and so on. So in this kind of structure, it's called functional structure. That this structure is typically coordinated and controlled by the top management. So we can call it tend to be more centralized because the decision is up to the top management. Next is when the firm is diversifies its products. So the structure was switching to the product divisional structure. In here, each division is responsible for a distinct product line or business area. So in the divisional structure, the operating decision will be more decentralized to a product division, but the headquarter will responsible for the overall strategic development and financial control, which is more centralized. In this slide, I show you the picture of functional structure and product divisional structure. Next, we will talk about international division. It's basically when the firm grouping all the international activities into a division, which is called international divisions. But as time goes by, the production facilities will be added on the country-by-country basis. So it had impact on the firm will tend to replicate a functional or divisional structure that they use at home country in every country in which the firm does business. So there are some problems that might arise by using the international division. The first one is there's a dual structure between domestic and foreign operations, potentially can create the conflict and coordination problems because sometimes heads of foreign subsidiaries are not given as much voice in the organization as the heads of domestic. The second one is lack of coordination between domestic and foreign operation. Here in this slide, I show you the picture of international division. We will talk about worldwide area structure. This structure is used by international firms with a low degree of diversification, and the domestic structure is based on functions. So it's basically the structure is divided by geographic area, like the picture I show you in this slide. In this kind of structure, each area tends to be self-contained, has autonomous entity with its own set of value creation activities. The advantage of the structure is facilitates the organizational to high local responsiveness because it's able for each division to customize product offering, marketing strategy, and business strategy to local conditions. But on the other side, because this structure is encouraged fragmentation into highly autonomous entities, the each areas will be difficult to do a transfer core competencies and skills, and also it's difficult to realize localization and experience curve economies.
Hello everyone, my name is Tamara Alkila and I'm going to present about the worldwide product divisional structure. This structure tends to be adopted by firms that are reasonably diversified and have domestic structures based on the product divisions. It allows for worldwide coordination of value creation activities of each product division and help to realize location and experience curve economies. It also facilitates the transfer of core competencies and doesn't allow for local responsiveness. So the next one is global metric structure. This structure attempts to minimize the limitations of the worldwide area structure and the worldwide product divisional structure. It allows for differentiations along two dimensions because the philosophy of this structure is that responsibility for operating decisions pertaining to a particular product should be shared by the product divisions and the various areas of the firms. So those two dimensions have equal responsibility for operating decisions. So it leads to dual decision making that can result bureaucratic and slow. Because the need to get an area and a product divisions to reach a decision can slow decision making and produce an inflexible organizations unable to respond quickly to market shifts or to innovate. It also can result in conflict between areas and product divisions and also result in finger pointing between divisions when something goes wrong. So the next one is integrating mechanism. It is the mechanism for coordinating subunits. The coordination can be complicated by differences in subunit orientations and goals. Both formal and informal help to achieve coordination. The next one is the impediment to coordinations. Because managers of the various subunits have different orientations, partly because they have different tasks, it can inhibit communication between the managers. Or in other words, these managers often do not even speak the same language. It can also be a lack of respect between subunits. For example, marketing managers look down on production managers and vice versa. The differences in subunits orientations arise from their different goals between the managers, and the differences in subunit orientations are often reinforced in multinationals by the separation of time zone, distance, and the nationality between the managers of the subunits. So the next one is the first form of integrating mechanism, which is the formal one. In general, the greater the need for coordinations, the more complex the formal integrating mechanism needs to be. The first one is the simplest one, which is the direct contact. By this mechanism, managers of the various subunits simply contact each other whenever they have common concern. And the next one is liaison roles, when it is a bit more complex. So the coordinations can be improved by giving a person in each subunit's responsibility for coordinating with another subunit on a regular basis. When the need for coordinations increases, then the firms tend to use the temporary or permanent teams composed of individuals from the subunits that need to achieve coordinations. It's called teams. And when the need for integration is very high, the firms may institute the matrix structure, in which all roles are viewed as integrating roles. For example, product development and introduction teams are typically composed of personnel from R&D, productions, and marketing. That's all for me. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, my name is Robby Kurnia and now I'm going to continue our presentation regarding integrating mechanism. Now is the informal integrating mechanism. To avoid problems associated with formal integrating mechanisms, firms with a high need for integration have been experimenting with an informal integrating mechanism, that is knowledge networks, that are supported by an organizational culture that values teamwork and cross-unit cooperation. Now, a knowledge network is a network for transmitting information within an organization that is based not on a formal organizational structure, but on informal contacts between managers within an enterprise and on distributed information systems. So as an example, we have figure above that shows simple network relationships between 7 managers, that is from A to G, within a multinational firm. As we can see, managers A, B, C, and D, E, F know each other personally, shown by the lines connecting them. And then, as an example, manager B does not know manager F personally, but they are linked through common acquaintance, that is manager C and D. Thus, manager A to F are all part of the same network, and manager G is not. Now we're going to continue our presentation to the next part of the chapter, that is control systems and incentives. First, we're going to need to know the types of control systems. There are personal controls, cultural controls, bureaucratic controls, and output controls. So, personal control is control that is achieved by personal contact with subordinates. This type of control tends to be most widely used in small firms, where it's seen in the direct supervision of subordinates' actions. However, it also structures the relationships between managers at different levels in multinational enterprises. The second one, Cultural control exists when employees buy into the norms and value systems of the firm. When this occurs, employees tend to control their own behavior, which reduces the need for the direct supervision. In a firm with strong culture, self-control can reduce the need for other control systems. The third one is bureaucratic control. That is control achieved through a system of rules and procedures that directs the actions of subunits. The most important bureaucratic controls in subunits within multinational firms are budget and capital spending rules. Now, for output controls, it involves the setting goals for subunits to achieve and expressing those goals in terms of relatively objective performance metrics such as profitability, productivity, growth, market share, and quality. The performance of subunit managers is then judged by their ability to achieve the goals. If goals are met or exceeded, subunit managers will be rewarded, and if goals are not met, top management will normally intervene to find out why and take appropriate corrective action.
Hello everyone, my name is Putri Nilam and I'm going to present the first one is about incentive system. Incentive system is a device or tool to reward some of the employee that deserve this. And the incentive system usually closely tied to the performance metrics used for output controls. An incentive system is created by the company to make the employee work harder and harder every day to exceed the target. And the incentive system may be given a share of any profit above those targeted. There are several important points need to be made in implementing the incentive system by the multinational company. The first one is the type of incentive depending on the employees and their tasks, which use must be matched to the type of work being performed. So it might be different from one employee to another, the incentive system. And the second one is the successful execution of strategy in the multinational company often requires significant cooperation between managers in different subunits. And the last one is the incentive system in multinational company often have to be adjusted to account for national differences in institution and culture, because the multinational company have many different nationality in them, so the reward maybe have to see the difference in that culture as well. Next, so there are some key to understand the relationship between international strategy, control system, and incentive system. We should know the concept of performance ambiguity. Performance ambiguity exists when the cause of a subunit's poor performance are not very clear. We should know the meaning between strategy, interdependence, and ambiguity. That three things is very connected between each other, because every multinational company have and every strategy in multinational company have a different interdependence and ambiguity. Interdependence is somewhat higher in the international firm, the level, and the integration in multinational company is required to facilitate the transfer of core competency and skill. And the implication for control and incentive for international company is the cost of control can be defined as the amount of time top management must be devoted to monitoring and evaluating subunits performance. Next, we can see from the table the strategy we know is localization, international, global, and transnational. The localization strategy, the interdependence is low, performance ambiguity is low, and cost of control is low. But for international, it is moderate, and moderate. For global, the interdependence is high, performance ambiguity is high, and cost of control is high. And transnational, all of them is very high. Interdependence, performance ambiguity, and the cost of control for strategy is different from each other. The cost of control can be defined as the amount of time the top management must devote their time to monitoring and evaluating subunit performance. As we can see, for transnational, cost of control is very high. It means that for the top management, they should have a lot of time to see and monitor and evaluate the subunit's performance. And when performance ambiguity is low, the management can use output control and a system of management by exception. When it is high, managers have no such luxury. The management must devote time to resolving the problems that arise from performance ambiguity with a cost of corresponding rise in the cost of control. Next, process. Process is defined as the manner in which decisions are made and works is performed within the organization can be found at many different levels within an organization. An organization process can be summarized by means of a flow chart which illustrates the various steps and decision points involved in performing work. Efficient and effective process can lower the cost of value creation and add additional value to a product. As we all know that efficient and effective product is will make the cost of the company more cheaper and something like that. Next, there are two basic remarks about managing process that we should know. The first one is that a multinational company, the chance of pulling off the incentive system and the strategy of the company is based on the process of an organizational culture that promotes cooperation. And the second one is we should, as a company, recognize that valuable new process that might lead our company to have a competitive advantage that can be developed anywhere within the organizational global network of operation.
So, good morning, Ma'am Sari and classes. So, my name is Muhammad Ananda Raf'i, and I will continue the presentation about organizational culture. So for the first part, we will discuss, and I will remind all of you regarding the organizational culture that we have been discussed in the first part of our lecture. There are three parts of the organizational culture. It's called a culture, values, and norms. Culture is a system of values and norms that are shared among people, where values are abstract ideas about what a group believes to be good, right, and desirable. And norms defines as a social rules and guidelines that prescribe appropriate behavior in particular situations. Now, we will discuss about how to create and maintain the organizational culture. So, now let us discuss about the source of the organizational culture itself. There are three main sources of the organizational culture. The first one is there seems to be a wide agreement that founders or important leaders can have a profound impact on an organization's culture, often imprinting their own values of the culture. For example, like Konosuke Matsuhita's, he is a leader of one of the company called Matsuhita that have a business philosophy that called as a 7 spiritual values of Matsushita, that all of their employees is still learning the values itself, like a struggle for betterment, national service through industry, gratitude, etc. But a leader is widely credited with having changed the culture when the culture is built by their own founders, but it will be more challenging for the newcomers of the executives to change their culture. For example, like Jack Welch, he is the brand new CEO of General Electric. He primarily emphasizing a countercultural set of values such as risk-taking, entrepreneurship, stewardship, and boundaryless behavior. And it is more difficult for him to force an established organizational culture than it is to create one from scratch in a new venture. So another important influence of an organizational culture is to the broader of the social culture of the nation where the firm was founded and or has significant operations. For example, the competitive ethic of individualism looms large and in the United States, and there is enormous social stress on producing winners. So many American firms find ways of rewarding and motivating individuals so that they see themselves as winners. And it is contradicts when you find it in Japan, when they seems have a organizational culture that focus and more oriented to a collective thing. So they have a main focus on not as an individual but as a company. And a third influence on organizational culture is the history of the enterprise, which over time may come to shape the values of the organization. In the language of historians, organizational culture is the path-dependent product of where the organization has been through time. So, after we discuss about the source of the organizational culture, we will talk about how to maintain the culture of the organization itself. There are four mechanisms that we can use. The first one is hiring and promotional practices by recruit people whose values consistent with the company. The second one is the reward strategies, where promote individuals whose behavior consistent with the core values of organization. The third one is socialization process. There are two kinds of the socialization process. The first one is informal with training programs that will be provided by the company, and the second one is the informal way, which is advice from peers or bosses. And the last one is communication strategy, where the company framing key values in corporate mission statements, communicating to employees, and guide them for the sake of the company. So after we discuss about the how to create and maintain the organizational culture, now we will talk about organizational culture and performance in the international business. So there are terms in the organizational culture called a strong culture, where sharing a relatively consistent share of values and norms that have a clear impact on the way work is performed. So, firms with a strong culture are normally seen by outsiders as having a certain style or way of doing things. Strong culture does not necessarily mean good, and in the appropriateness of the culture depend on the context. So, firms that exhibited high performance over a prolonged period tend to have a strong but adaptive cultures, where they also implement a strong culture where the customers, stockholders, and employees are the first and main priority of their culture. And the need for a common organizational culture varies with the strategy of the firm. And a company should have a shared norms and common culture also. After we discuss about the organizational culture, now we will talk about the synthesis between strategy and architecture in international business. Now, we will talk about 4 basic strategies for the multinational firms. The first 2 strategy will be explained by myself, and the other 2 strategies will be discussed by my friend. The first 2 is localization strategy and international strategy. For the localization strategy, firms tend to operate with worldwide area structures within which operating organizations are decentralized to functionally self-contained country subsidiaries. So, the need for the coordination is low between each of the subsidiaries area. The integrating mechanisms is none. Then also the performance ambiguity is low because they already decentralize all of their business operations, and also the need for cultural controls is low. And for the next strategy, which is international strategy, they are slightly different from the localization strategy because they create value by transferring core competencies from home to foreign subsidiaries, which operates with a worldwide product division structure. There are several core competencies that will be transferred from the main company to the subsidiaries. So this strategy implies that they are not fully decentralized all of their business operations. The core competencies that basically will be transferred from the main from the main companies, as known as like centralized control regarding the research and development, and also how to market the product, the marketing strategy. And for the other competencies, it will be decentralized for the subsidiaries itself. So the need for coordination is moderate, and the integrating mechanisms is already viewed, but because there are still several core competencies that is decentralized, and the performance ambiguity is moderate, and also the need for cultural controls is also moderate.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dimas Kusuma Putra, and next I want to talk about global standardization. So, when a firm chose this strategy, they focus on the realization of the location. The definition itself is the ability to use the same strategy internationally. In other words, it is the ability for a company or business to use the same strategy from one country to next and across various cultures. When a product has basically the same appeal all over the world, global standardization is a useful tool. In general, such firms are more centralized than enterprise pursuing a localization or international strategy, reflecting the need for coordination of the various stage of the firm's globally dispersed value chain. The need for integration in these firms also high. They also tend to use incentive systems that are linked to performance metrics at the corporate level, giving the managers of the different operations a strong incentive to cooperate with each other to increase the performance of entire corporation. On average, the organization of such firm is more complex than that firm that pursuing a localization or international strategy. Next one, I want to talk about transnational strategy. Companies pursuing a multinational strategy focus on the simultaneous realization of location and experience the growth economy, local responsiveness, and the global learning. Transnational strategy takes advantage of the new smallness of the world by allowing brands and companies to expand their global footprint in selling of their goods and services, while taking into account cultural and societal differences that shape consumers in their native environment. The need to coordinate a global dispersed value chain and to transfer core competencies create pressures for centralizing some operating decisions. The high interdependence of subunits implied by this integration may lead to obvious performance ambiguities, terribly increasing control costs. Companies pursuing multinational strategies need to cultivate a strong culture and establish incentives to promote cooperation between subunits. Next, I want to talk about environment strategy, architecture, and performance. Based on the table 14.2, or on the right, there's some foundation and the plan that explain the fit between strategy and architecture that is essential for company to achieve high performance or success. There's two conditions that must be met. The first one, the company strategy must be consistent with the company operating environment. We already discussed this issue in chapter 13 and point out that in some industry, a global standardization strategy is the most feasible. And in other industries, an international or transnational strategy may be the most feasible. And also in other industries, a localization strategy probably the most feasible. It also leads to the second condition where the firm organizational architecture must be consistent within its strategy. So, if the strategy is not suitable for the environment, the company may experience a significant performance issue. Also, if the architecture doesn't fit the strategy, the company may also experience the performance issue. So, in order to survive, the company must strive to adapt its environment, strategy, and organizational structure to the environment. The next one, I want to talk about organizational change, where a multinational company must periodically change their structures to make them comply with the change in their competitive environment and the strategies they pursue. In order to be profitable, some companies must change their strategies and structures so that both are in line with the requirements of the competitive environment in the industry. The author of this book said that although the detailed consideration of organizational change is beyond the scope of this book, but it's also worthwhile to comment on the source of organizational inertia and the strategies that for implementing organizational change. So the first one is organizational inertia. Basically, the organization culture and structures is difficult to change. Organizational inertia is the tendency of an organization to develop over time to continue its on-state business as usual. Most of organizations have strong inertial force within them, and these are some forces could be the sources to the inertia itself. The first one is the existing distribution of power and influence within the organization. The power and influence enjoyed by individual managers depend to a certain extent on their role in the organizational hierarchy, such as defined by a structural location. By definition, the most significant change in an organization require change to the organizational structure and expansion of power and influence within the organization. Due to organizational change, some people will see their power and influence increase, and while others will see the opposite. The second one is the existing culture as expressed in norm and value system. If the normal and informal socialization mechanism within the organization have been emphasizing a consistent set of value for a long time, and if hiring and promotion incentive system have strengthened this value, then suddenly announcing that these values are no longer applicable and will be conflict and discord between the employee. Organizational inertia might also derive from senior managers' preconception about the appropriate business model or paradigm that has worked well in the past. And the managers might have trouble accepting that is no longer appropriate. The third one is institutional constraint. National regulation, including local content rules and policies related to layoff. Those factors may make it difficult for multinational companies to change their global value chain. Multinational companies may wish to control manufacture from local subsidiaries, transfer control to the global product department, and merge manufacturing in several selected locations. Do local content regulation require a certain level of local production and relevant layoff that make it difficult or expensive for multinational company to close their operation in certain country? And multinational company may find that this restriction may it very difficult to adopt to the most effective strategies and structure. The next one is implementing organizational change. So although all organizations are suffering in inertia condition, the complexity and global distribution of many multinational companies may make it particularly difficult for them to change their strategies and solution. Structures to adapt to the new organizational culture. In many industries, the trend of globalization has made it more important than ever for many multinational companies to do this. In industry after industry, the decline in cross-border trade and investment barriers has led to a change in the nature of the competitive environment. Cost pressures are increasing, requiring multinational companies to respond by streamlining their operation to realize that the economic benefit related to the geographic location and experience curve economy. And with the transfer of the internal capabilities and skills within the organization, local responsiveness is still an important source of differentiation. There's the basic principles for successful organizational change can be summarized as this. The first one is unfreeze the organization through the shock therapy. The second, move the organization to a new state through the proactive change in the architecture. And the third one, refreeze the organization in its new states. So let's talk about the first one. The first one is unfreezing the organization. Due to the inertial force, major changes are usually hard to do. Those forces are people threatened by change can easily resist incremental change. This led to the Big Bang theory of change, which believed that effective change requires early bold action to unfreeze the established culture of the organization and change the distribution of power and influence. It is also important to realize that unless senior managers are committed to change, the change will not happen. Senior managers must clearly articulate the need for change so that the employees understand why they are pursuing change and benefit from successful change. Senior managers must also practice their preaching and take the bold steps necessary. If employees see senior managers advocating the need for change, but do not change their behavior or make substantial change to the organization, they will quickly lose confidence in the change and they will fall into trouble. And the second one is moving to the new stage. After unfreezing the organization, they must be moved to a new state. The movement requires action, closing action, restructuring, redistributing responsibilities, changing control, incentive and reward system, redesigning process and letting those who are seen as an obstacle. In other words, the movement requires major change to the organizational structure of multinational companies to match the required new strategic posture. In order for the movement to succeed, the company must be moved at a sufficient speed. Engaging employees in change work is an excellent way for them to appreciate and understand the need for change. Third and the last one is refreezing the organization. Refreezing the organization means that the company itself must penetrate new culture to all of their internal stakeholders. It will take longer to refreeze the organization. It may be necessary to establish a new culture while dismantling the old culture. Therefore, refreezing requires socializing employees as a new way of working. Recruitment policies must be changed to reflect the new culture with an emphasis on hiring individuals whose personal value are consistent with the new culture the company is trying to build. Likewise, the control and incentive system must be aligned with the culture of organization. Otherwise, change will never happen. Senior management must realize that it takes a long time to change the culture. Any relief from the pressure of change may reappear the old culture because the employees will retreat to familiar ways of doing things. Therefore, the communication task faced by senior managers is a long-term job that requires managers to perceive and persevere in pursuit of change.
Now we get to the case overview, that is IKEA, furniture retailer to the world. And in this part, I'm going to explain a little about our case regarding the intro, the background, and the international expansion made by IKEA. So IKEA is one of the world's most successful global retailers. IKEA was established by Ingvar Kamprad in Sweden in 1943, when he was just 17 years old. At first, the fledgling company sold fish, Christmas magazines, and seeds from his family farm. But by 1973, IKEA was the largest furniture retailer in Scandinavia with 9 stores. And at the time, Kamprad felt that growth opportunities were limited, so the company expanded rapidly in Western Europe during the next 15 years. IKEA also entered North America, opening 7 stores in Canada between 1976 and 1982. Emboldened by this success, in 1985, the company entered the United States. And to tap into America's shifting culture, IKEA re-emphasized its design, and it started promoting itself with a series of quirky hip advertisements aimed at a younger demographic, like newlywed couples, and then people in the range of age of 20s to 30s.
Now, we will discuss about the concept, management, and the future of IKEA. IKEA's target market is the young, upwardly mobile global middle class who are looking for a low price but attractively designed furniture and household items. Therefore, company use wacky offbeat ads to increase traffic into the stores. The interior of the stores, as you see in the IKEA, is configured almost as a maze that requires customers to pass through each department to get to the checkout. The goal for IKEA to make that concept is to get customers to make more impulsive buying. Products are designed to reflect the clean Swedish lines that have become IKEA's trademark. There is a group of senior managers who establish priorities for IKEA's product. Once a priority is established, IKEA will set the price point that is 30 to 50% below competitors, so they require to find the appropriate suppliers and least costly materials. When we talk about the IKEA's organization and management, they also reflected by the personal philosophy of the founder itself. Kamprad is described as an informal and frugal man, and his frugality is now a part of IKEA's DNA. IKEA is a mission-driven company, which is to make life better for masses and democratize furniture. Kamprad's management style was informal, non-hierarchical, and team-based. IKEA also prefer to hire younger people who have not worked for other companies, and they will upscale their career in the IKEA. Regarding IKEA to be a public company, Kamprad believes that the stock market could impose short-term pressures on IKEA because the company will be requested to always gain profit in every year to satisfy the stakeholders, and specifically the stockholders of the company. And in the end, Kamprad decided to transfer his interest in IKEA to a Dutch-based charitable foundation, Stichting Inca Foundation. And in 1986, Kamprad gave up a day-to-day control of IKEA to Andres Moberg, while he continued to exert influence over the company as the advisor of the company. Now, in a half century, IKEA had established an enviable position for itself. It had become one of the most successful retail establishments in the world. It had expanded into numerous foreign markets, learning from its failures and building on its successes. It had bought affordable, well-designed, functional furniture to the masses, helping them to, in Kamprad's words, achieve a better everyday life. IKEA's goal was to continue to grow, opening approximately 20 to 25 stores a year for the foreseeable future. Achieving that growth will mean expansion into non-Western markets, including most notably China, where it had recently established a beachhead. So, for the next section, we will discuss about the case questions.
So the first question of case discussion is, by the early 1970s, IKEA had established itself as the largest furniture retailer in Sweden. What was the source of its competitive advantage at that time? In Sweden, at that time, the majority of furniture companies were offering an expensive product with a model design that were basic or passed down from generation to generation. Most of the manufacturers' stores were located in downtown congested areas, so IKEA proposed the idea to offer the lower prices product with the innovative design which can capture the young upwardly middle class market. The lower price can be offered because firm able to produce goods at lower cost too. Also, the firm also offer the service of self-assembly and the store itself located in the open rural areas which provide large parking areas.
Next, I want to answer the second question. Here. The IKEA Europe expansion went so well as we know that is where the company was founded. In 1943, entrepreneur Ifgard Kamprad took his ideas that he learned from his homeland, Sweden, to produce a store that churned out pen, wallets, and watches. According to Business Today, in Europe and in the US, where the most customers use personal vehicle, IKEA stores are usually located in the suburbs. The commonality of their customers and how they use transportation is one reason why their expansion went so well. Americans demanding a bigger beds and bigger clothes, as opposed to China, is the one strategies from a marketing perspective that had to be altered as it contributed to them stumbling subsequently. One of the lessons that they learned from that particular experience was to understand what could make a profit where and how to position that each region and city may have a different demand for a certain product through various periods of a calendar year. The company is applying those lessons on the fly after seeing the results as a successful organization should go about it. For instance, Americans are one of the most obese nations in the world, so adjusting their bed size relatively to China was something that contributed to profit. Sticking to lower price and staying true to their brand is a valuable lesson that they learn that keep them in business for decades.
The third question about the case is, how would you categorize IKEA's strategy before its misstep in North America, and how would you characterize its strategy today? We can see it, IKEA's strategy before its misstep in North America is they're having the same strategy and branding like IKEA's headquarters, Sweden. So American people doesn't really accept the IKEA's concept of Sweden, such as the product is too small, and also there are some differentiation of concept that is famous in Europe and famous in US. Like for example, the sizing for a bed sold in IKEA. For Europe, they are using like king, queen, and something, and for the America, the sizing is called different. So the American people is not really familiar with the sizing concept of IKEA, and then the chosen location in the US is not right, and also the branding and also the price of the product is not fitting the market in US. So they are not very well accepted in North America because of that strategy. And before the misstep, they use centralization, but they are not really flexible and they are not shaping the strategy to the destination country. So the American people is not really accepting the pure IKEAs with the Sweden culture and Sweden product. And as of now, IKEA strategy is still centralization, which we can see it that the system is basically the same like the originated places in Sweden, but there are like the small things and the detailed things is a little bit different in Sweden and in the every country in the world like Indonesia, China, US, and other European country. They use this strategy because they see that every country have a different culture and different perception and also different like sizing and different culture, so they know that they should differentiate the detail of the IKEA. And IKEA are using international strategy, which they implement a little difference in the country. For example, for US, they are receiving a lot of customization product, and for the China, IKEA there is a display of the product in balcony because China's people. Almost the majority of China's people have balcony in their house, so they have a specialty to display a product, and product they sell in balcony because they see the opportunity in selling a product for using in the balcony in China's region. Thank you.
And now I'm going to explain our answer about the case discussion questions number 4. And the questions are, what is IKEA's strategy toward its suppliers and how important is this strategy to IKEA's success? In our group opinion, IKEA always offers the highest quality products at the lowest possible prices. In realizing this, IKEA seeks for suppliers who are able to produce high-quality products with cheaper materials. IKEA places great importance on its relationship with suppliers. IKEA helps its suppliers develop and purchase the most modern technology so that products made for IKEA are cheaper. And then IKEA offers the prospect of forging a long-term and high-volume business relationship. Of course, the strategy adopted by IKEA will bring benefits to IKEA and its suppliers. Suppliers can gain benefits from new technological knowledge so that they can reduce the production costs. For IKEA itself, IKEA can reach its success through the creation of IKEA products with high quality at the lowest prices compared to its competitors. Thus, IKEA will become the main choice for consumers in the furniture market.
I'm going to discuss about the case questions 5. So the questions are, what is the sources of IKEA's success today? Can you see any weaknesses in the company and what might it to do to correct those weaknesses? The key success of IKEA, the first one is understanding regional preferences and integrating each country of expansion culture in the way they do businesses. As mentioned in the case that with the US they have some local customizations, and also in China the stores reflect the layout of many Chinese apartments. The second one is internal relationship and egalitarian culture that adopted Kamprad management style that was also informal, non-hierarchical, and team-based. He viewed his team as extended family. The weaknesses, there are 3 weaknesses. The first one is as IKEA grew, the size and scale of its global business could be a weaknesses. And also the reliability on sub-manufacturers and outside suppliers for its production can lead to non-compliance of furniture manufacturing regulations. And the last one is the centralization of decision making could be a potential weaknesses. So how to address those weaknesses? The first one, IKEA could do the partnership with local companies or manufacturers with the contracts, and also thinking globally but act locally.